Hello friends. This is the Ani Fanfics. How are you all? So we are back with third episode on what if Naruto had 3 bloodline, magnet, explosion, plasma, and also had light release. But before we begin, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin. For the last 4 months, Blood Squad, besides training, has been doing D-ranked missions, basically chores around the village. Everything from painting fences, tilling gardens, watching children for a noble clan, and catching Tora missions. The cat owned by the daimyo of Fire's wife, who seems to have a penchant for escaping from its mistress, and almost always finds its way to Konoha, where various genin try to catch the fiendish feline. The genin did not really mind, D-ranks were decent pay for the work they had to do, and with Naruto's Senko and Kage Bunshin, a day-long D-rank for most genin would only take a few hours for Blood Squad, which allowed them more time to train together or do more D-ranks for the day, but the team was getting anxious to test themselves against real enemies that were trying to kill them. They were walking toward the Hokage mansion, and the genin were hoping to get their first C-ranked mission. Kurenai looked at her students, Hinata and Sakura walking on either side of Naruto, chatting amiably together, and reflected back on the last 4 months. Flashback 4 months ago. Naruto's progress in Senko Bunshin allowed him to discover how to make them using normal, non-elemental chakra. This allowed him to make them more quickly and in greater abundance than before, up to 2,000 clones at a pop. All with the same capabilities as the original flash clone technique, including the durability, but most importantly, it meant he could teach his jutsu to anybody who wished to learn it or anybody he wished to teach. The first person he taught it to was also the first person to ever show him love, his aunt Yugao, who expressed interest early on for him to teach her. He had already taught her his true transformation technique and surrogate substitution. Now with flash clones, he felt he had sufficiently paid her back for taking him in when he was 6, now he could just be her nephew. The trick, Yugao-chan, is in this hand sign, he told her as he demonstrated. He put his thumbs against each other and allowed his other fingers to fall naturally at the junctions of the fingers and the rest of his hands. The formation produced a natural-looking cylinder that looked exactly like an eye socket. I call this the oculus, he said, making sure she had it down before going on. He raised it to about the height of his chest. What you do is project your chakra through the center. As he demonstrated through actions what he spoke about, what happens is your chakra gathers the photons you need to put together the clones. You'll notice a slight dimming in the immediate area around your projected path. Then, the dimming he mentioned occurred. Then just before total darkness, there was a flash of bright light. Voila, your very own twin. Yugao was a good student and of course, had more experience with chakra than her nephew, so she only needed the bare minimum of instruction before she was able to pull off the jutsu like the professional she was. That did not stop her from jumping in celebration when she made her first flash clone. I did it, oh, Kami-sama, I did it, when she looked back at her perfect clone. Naruto looked at her smiling. He felt proud that he was able to teach her something else. She has taught him everything else he knew, including what it felt like to know love. Yugao Oba-sen was the closest thing he had to a mother, and though he called her aunt, she was his mother in every way except name. His expression grew serious, and he spoke. I recommend starting out by using half your chakra, Naruto suggested. That way, you'll know exactly how many you can make before chakra exhaustion sets in. Yugao nodded, and her clone dispelled in another flash of light. Naruto looked lost in thought as he imparted his own experiences to his aunt about Senko Bunshin no Jutsu. I can make them using other forms of EMR, so I'm covered on stealth missions, but if you need to be stealthy, I recommend making them out of line of sight of your prey, or they'll give you away. I would also suggest learning the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu as a supplement to Senko Bunshin no Jutsu. They could be used interchangeably and only differ in durability to the latter, Naruto noted, then with a smile, added, I'm gonna trade teaching this to the Hokage to learn it for myself. I think they would be totally useful for screwing up an enemy's confidence. His aunt just laughed at his wicked side. The feeling he had for her being his mother was absolutely reciprocated in her heart. If in the future she was lucky enough to have children, in her mind she has already been a mother. Naruto may not have come from between her legs, he was still very much her boy. Yugao prayed to Kami and her sister every time she slept and thanked them for giving her a son. After teaching his aunt, he followed through on trading the Senko Bunshin for the Kage Bunshin to the Hokage. She even allowed Naruto to learn the Bunshin Daibakufu. Now he had 2 clone techniques that could explode in an enemy's face. He practiced with them so much, he not only could make them silently, but even eliminated the telltale plume of smoke, and the kicker came when both sets of clones began to make each other. Naruto, in addition to his other training, started practicing formation training with one or the other types of clones at first, but later, he began to mix the 2 types of clones together, creating a real-life version of the shell game. Naruto got so good at creating clones that he could recreate even his own smells, enough that he could fool Inunin, even the Inyazuka breeds, which had lived with that clan so much, they had adopted their human partner's reasoning abilities. Naruto's other training proceeded apace, and he along with his teammates grew in strength daily. Naruto created 2 invisibility techniques. The first one was C-ranked, he calls it Bluff of the Blind Man. It follows the principles of taming the wave by shunting all electromagnetic radiation around the user. It does not redirect into anybody's eyes, so the observer cannot see. Conversely, neither can the recipient, because it redirects all light away from the recipient, even that which was directed to his or her eyes. Naruto used it to practice using his other senses and not to rely just on his eyes. This was a skill he taught his teammates. It was also where they found out that Kidoton does cripple the effectiveness of the Byakugan. Hinata, when he used it on her, was just as blind as his other 3 teammates. The second technique, which he called Unseen, followed the principles of breaking the spectrum. Naruto compressed the waves of EMR that struck him, but allowed the photons to retain their energy. Since cells need the energy from the photons to conduct their operations, but as they're abounded from his body, he forced the waves to stretch almost flat, beyond even a radio wave's wavelength. This allowed Naruto to be invisible, truly invisible. He stood next to Hinata and her father for an hour, without revealing himself, and Itachi Uchiha could not see him either. He could have stolen anything, even jutsu ideas if he wanted to, but he kept himself to a strict code of ethics when using his kekkei tota. He did not peep on women in the hot springs, nor use his alternative visual spectrum to see through their clothes. He asked Hinata about her clan's rules of privacy, since all of them had a dojutsu that could aid them in seeing through solid objects. Naruto even spoke to the elder Uchiha about when they used the Sharingan while in the clan compound or sparring with each other. The elders had been briefed on Naruto's light release after he became a genin. The first month of Blood Squad's training was spent on a mixture of chakra control, physical exercises that paled in anything they ever worked on at the academy, and team activities. Chakra control was essential for any ninja, from academy students to the Hokage to even Sandaime Sarutobi-sama. Every ninja practiced some form of chakra control. The version of chakra control they learned at the academy, regardless of whatever variation was devised from it, is considered the most basic exercise in the regimen. The more control one had over one's chakra, the more powerful and varied the capabilities of the ninja, whether it was for ninjutsu, jinjutsu, or even taijutsu. A ninja's power came, not from the amount of chakra one had, but from controlling that chakra. The next day after the genin skills exam, Kurenai introduced them to vertical walking. They returned to the cliff from the day before, and she demonstrated. "I've seen Yugao do that, but she would not teach it to me," Naruto groused. "Of course not," Kurenai grinned from beside Naruto. She was using a flash clone, which Naruto had taught to her. Anko and Hana-chan, Sakura and Hinata did not yet have the chakra reserves for either of Naruto's clone techniques. "You know as well as I do that it's illegal for anyone to teach these techniques to academy students. Only genin are allowed to learn them, per military law." Naruto still grumbled. "I know, but it's not fair," he sulked. There was a smack to the back of the head for Naruto from Kurenai. "Did you want some cheese with your wine, Naruto?" she growled, getting in his face. "You're an adult now, and adults don't bitch and whine about fair or unfair, they suck it up and get on with completing the exercise. Now, stop moping around like an Uchiha and get going with the exercise," Kurenai ordered, "and no clones while training with your team. I won't let you rub it in their faces that you have an advantage they don't, understood, Genin Uzumaki?" Naruto thoroughly re-aimed, popped to attention, and bowed. "Hi, Ikki-sensei," he bellowed, before bowing again. "My apologies, Ikki-sensei, for wasting our time with this behavior, please forgive me." "That on with it, Genin Uzumaki," Kurenai barked. "Hi, Ikki-sensei," Naruto barked back, then turning he hurried up to the cliff and put his foot on it and began practicing the exercise. Kurenai watched him go, her gaze flicking occasionally up and down his body, and she felt a trickle run down her face from her nose, which she quickly wiped away. It would not do for the one she just chewed out to look back and see her with a nosebleed. They spent the first month of their fellowship practicing vertical walking, and Naruto never complained again. He also took to heart what his sensei had about having an advantage his teammates did not have. As a method to keep himself humble, he followed Kurenai's order. Even after that day, during chakra control training, it was Naruto the original that trained his chakra. He practiced daily, and even when not with his team, the true Naruto practiced walking up and down the side of the Uzumaki main house walls. The chores he did around the house that required vertical walking helped him train it as well, like washing the exterior windows or touching up the paint where the wood was showing, were all him. The Flash and Shadow clones practiced his ninjutsu, the forms of his taijutsu, kinjutsu, and the calligraphy for his fuinjutsu. The Flash clones practiced sparring, empty-handed or weapon to weapon. While he was not trying to become a weapons master like Sakura, he may come across opponents wielding these weapons, and the best way to learn to fight against them was to learn to fight with them. His weapon of choice was the sword he wore on his back, to which he had added a seal from within the Uzumaki archive to his sword and ninja tool pouch. The seal allowed the kunai and shuriken in the pouch, along with his sword, to be replicated perfectly when Naruto made either type of clone. He practiced with his sword every day, against his aunt when she was home, or against Senko Bunshin, morphed into varying body types, from the really large and powerful, to small and quick. Which is also how he trained his empty-handed and kunai taijutsu techniques, after team training of course. Kage Bunshin trained his ninjutsu and calligraphy. Since neither Bunshin type could aid him in training his physical body, he waited to train that way until he was with his team, which through encouragement, helped all three of the genin become closer. Such was Naruto's skill with Fuinjutsu that he crafted 5 sets of gravity, resistance, and pressure seals, and gifted them to all 4 of his teammates in Kiba, with both of their sensei's permission of course. These seals, when they had chakra added to them, applied just the right amount of G-forces, resistances, and atmospheric pressures per square inch of their body to make one extremely uncomfortable, but not be detrimental to one's health. They were self-adjusting, so as soon as one's body became adjusted to the current level, it went up, which not only aided in maximizing their physical training, it helped them in chakra control, because one had to send a precise amount to one's feet to stay on the cliff. When the level of the seals went up, the genin had to adjust the level of chakra to their feet to compensate. Naruto gave Kurenai-sensei a set to encourage her not to stagnate, but to keep the fire and hunger in her eyes, and to keep training her body to maintain a balance between her yin and yang chakra, making her already potent jinjutsu even more powerful. This helped them increase the yang chakra as well, the type of chakra governing the physical body. Chakra had to be balanced, and there needed to be as much yin chakra growth as there was yang. Yin governed the mental and emotional energy of a person, so to compensate for the physical exertions, for yin, Kurenai introduced them to meditation, and Hinata contributed to this training by teaching them all Zen meditation. Also, every Friday and Saturday, to give their bodies a chance to recuperate, Blood Squad spent their days in the library. At first, Naruto remained steadfastly in the physical sciences, where he also directed Hinata and Sakura to get them started on learning about their elemental bloodlines. That was not the focus of Kurenai's intent for bringing her team to the library. The yin half of chakra was a mixture of both mental and emotional energy, and both had to be cultivated in order for yin to grow. She explained it to them with a metaphor, where chakra was represented by a tree with branches and leaves. Yang was the trunk that was strong and brought nutrients with it from the ground, and yin was the branches and leaves. The branches worked with the trunk to hold up the leaves, so they could collect the sunlight of wisdom and experience, and knowledge itself was the water added, so the tree could remain alive, hence the library trips. This was essential for anybody who wanted to learn to use jinjutsu, of which, at least 2 of her students had expressed interest, but Kurenai wanted all of her students to be at least familiar with the illusionist art, even if it was just learning to break them. So, she steered them gradually away from the physical sciences to the social subjects of learning. Specifically, psychology, philosophy, cognitive studies, including literature, history, and the humanities. Naruto kept his word to his teammates about getting them started learning to tap into their lightning chakra. The first exercise Naruto taught them was of course the one taught to him by Kakashi before he left for the capital to help guard the daimyo. Basically, lighting a light bulb with just his chakra. He guided the Kunoichi through Raiten chakra manipulation training, but left them to their own devices to create their own jutsu. Their team sensei also helped the ladies by training Sakura and Hinata in their water and fire manipulation, respectively. By the end of that first month they had the first leg of their chakra manipulation exercises down. Training them helped him remember the basics of elemental chakra manipulation as well, so on the days he helped them train their Raiten chakra, when he got home, he trained his other elemental affinities. This helped him remain in touch with his own basics. The Kunoichi were quite surprised when he suggested the practice of crocheting to get their dexterity up for casting ninjutsu. Kurenai said it will aid them in jinjutsu casting, too. As for their kekkei genkai, once they all had the basics of their primary nature transformations, they understood the basics of their secondary transformations, too. All of them attended the human anatomy classes for medical ninja, but Hinata and Naruto attended only to make certain techniques they were working on more deadly, since they targeted certain organ systems. Since all 3 genin used lightning chakra, they became interested in the nervous system. A judicious use of Raiten chakra could sear certain nerve endings shut, causing various effects to an enemy. Hinata's Raiten and Shinton were almost made for her Jiku. She was not very interested in long-range ninjutsu. The whole reason she wanted to learn sensory jinjutsu was so she could disorient her opponents, get close to them, and destroy them. Hinata made great headway with her vibration release, discovering a vibration sense that according to her, gave her a perfect all-around sensory data stream, even better than the Byakugan, though she refused to elaborate. It was a Hika clan secret. Hinata developed her vibe sense. It takes the vibrations produced by all matter and energy, down to the molecular level, and sends it to her brain, which interprets the information through 4 of her 5 senses: hearing, touch, taste, even her sense of smell. Her Byakugan has evolved her brain to only accept data from her Dojutsu, but her brain, it seems, works to harmonize with all of its parts, and the range she can extend it is in the same field of vision as her clan's Dojutsu, which at 4 months and 2 weeks later, has a range of up to 3 miles in all directions for both of her kekkei genkai. The hard part was not getting her to listen to her new sensory technique, the hard part was getting her to trust it. Luckily, for her sleep and sanity, deactivating it was easy, and they were able to teach her to control it within the first week of discovery, and by the end of that month, it had become as instinctual for her as it is for Naruto's M field. Hinata, however, had been taught from a very early age to give more regard to what her eyes tell her than what she gets from her other senses. Her vibe sense threw all of that out of the window, because now she had to learn to accept data coming from all of her other senses, which was difficult because you do not throw out years of operant conditioning overnight. Naruto's discovery of Bluff of the Blind Man helped Hinata overcome this conditioning, the rest of the team helped too. Naruto cast Blind Man's Bluff over Hinata, so even if she resorted subconsciously to using the Byakugan, it would do her no good. Once she learned that, she began listening to what her other senses were telling her, she found her equilibrium fairly easy. The vibe sense gave her perfect proprioception, the brain's perception of the body and its position and movement through space-time. Once Hinata was acclimated to using her senses while standing still, the team went on a hike through the forest. It was not the most treacherous path they could have taken, but it would definitely require you to pay attention. It was rough going for a little while. Blood Squad learned that Hinata had a penchant for swearing, especially when she bumped into things. It was Naruto who admonished her to stop fighting her senses, just accept their stimulus as truth. Hinata-chan, Naruto rebuked her, though gently, let your mind do the work of understanding. That is what you told us to do when we started Zazen meditation with you, is it not? Naruto reminded her. Hinata gave him a dirty look, though she could not see him, she knew exactly where he was. That's easy for you to say, Naruto-kun, she glared, you can still see where you're going. Your damn jutsu has rendered my family's Dojutsu obsolete. Naruto just grinned, which Hinata could feel, and it made her turn her back to him with a huff, crossing her arms over her body with a stomp of her foot. Trust me, I've had to practice something similar to this when I trained my electromagnetic force field and radio sense, he informed his teammate and friend, we're easing you into this, compared to what the Sandame and my own aunt did to me. They were throwing dull kunai and shuriken at me by this time in my training, he added. Besides, you're doing it, Hinata, she turned to look at him to understand what he meant. When you started yelling at me, you were looking in my direction, not in the direction my voice was coming from, but right at me. I suspect you could have thrown a kunai or shuriken at me and probably hit me if I didn't move, Naruto stated as he circled around her and she followed his path precisely. You're doing it even now as I speak to you. It seems when you stop thinking and just let things happen, your vibes work perfectly, it's when you try to take over that you mess up, am I right? Hinata sighed, very well, I'll enter Zazen and stop taking over. She did her best and finally learned to trust her vibes. She completed the hike a couple more times along the way, using different trails and routes. She even practiced vertical walking while blind, and once she did that, she was ready to practice more dynamic movements besides walking. They had Hinata practice her Jiku katas, all of them, until she was doing them the way they had seen her do them, when unencumbered. Once they were sure Hinata was doing her katas as flawlessly as she always demonstrated, they decided to test something else. Sarutobi carefully threw a kunai through a section that was close to her, but not directly at the genin kunoichi. Even while in the midst of her kata, they saw Hinata follow the path of the flying kunai with her head. Then, Kurenai threw a shuriken in such a way that it curved close to Hinata, but stayed just out of her reach. Hinata still followed its flight path, but continued to perform her kata. This was when Sakura threw a dull kunai directly at the Haika's exposed back. Hinata flowed out of the way but brought her palm around and without looking in that direction, caught the kunai by the handle, making it look like the move was all a part of her current sequence of movements. This was when Naruto jumped silently, with a kunai of his own at the ready. He thrust the blade rapidly toward the kunoichi, while Hinata used a blade she had caught as a makeshift defense, deflecting and dodging the blonde's attacks with professional flair. It was during one deflection that Naruto put his thumb, forefinger and middle finger together, saying, Terashimasu, and flicked his fingers open. There was a kaleidoscope of colored light and the world appeared in Hinata's eyes once more. Hinata did not lose a step in her spar with her crush, her trust in her new senses was at such an instinctive level by now that it barely even slowed her down when Naruto cancelled his Kidoton jutsu. She must have understood subconsciously that she was now seeing the blonde because, by Byakugan, she said, she began firing attacks at him even faster. Hinata was at a disadvantage because she only had a dull kunai as a weapon. Naruto was not so encumbered, and there was a reason he was the actual rookie of the year for her class, but they never got a chance to face each other in Taijutsu at the academy. Naruto's Taijutsu style, the Uzumaki style known as Hapkiyosu, was not very big on direct striking, but about neutralizing the force of an attack or redirecting it. It was meant to be used to kill larger foes, or those in armor, which emphasized joint manipulation, throwing, and counter-throwing. It was perfectly suited to be used with a bladed weapon in one or both hands. Jiku was mostly palm strikes, meant to target specific organs. The movements were soft and fluid, to absorb the impacts of strikes, or not be there when the strike arrived, but its strength was to be used empty-handed. Both styles favored flexibility and leverage over main strength, and only the Jiku's palm strikes and maneuverability required any form of speed. Hinata knew she needed to get some distance from Naruto. This is not how I want to get close to him. Her only chance was to not allow him to control the flow of the battle. Hinata began to maneuver around Naruto at a quicker rate, redirecting his thrusts and parrying his very precisely controlled slashes. His technique is flawless. She salivated for him until she saw and felt him relax. That meant he had discovered her pattern, which was what she had been waiting for, because she put a deliberate halt to her current movements, which made him rush ahead of her. Before he could reverse course, she rushed in behind him and slammed a chakra and adrenaline-fueled palm into Naruto's right flank, which was not enough to take him out. Naruto, knowing he was about to be struck, relaxed the muscles in his abdomen, dissipating the force enough to keep him in the fight, but not enough to prevent himself from being pushed away from his opponent. Naruto saw it. Hinata threw that unsharpened kunai directly at him. It bewildered him at first. She knew it would be useless against him. Even if he allowed it to hit him, it would not have done any permanent damage. Before it left her hand, he thought, he saw the blade become distorted and heard a little crack of what sounded like thunder. Then it was speeding toward him, and it was not moving through the air too fast for him to sidestep the knife. Hinata suddenly charged toward Naruto. She moved too fast for him to do anything, so he set himself for the impact, but instead of her whole body colliding with his, she literally ran up Naruto's front. She pushed off using a kick to his head from both legs. That attack did knock him over, and he was even seeing stars. Naruto-kun is a very good ninja, Hinata thought as she rebounded off Naruto's face. She backflipped through the air, letting her arms spread out to balance her, while she flew through the air. If he has any drawback, it's that he's too good for his age. He's so good that he sometimes gets cocky and taken with his own cleverness. As Hinata arsed through the air, the ground moving beneath her, he's not arrogant or anything, doesn't view anybody as beneath him, but sometimes he thinks he's Kami's gift and nobody his age can beat him. That's the sort of thinking that could lead to his demise, and I refuse to allow that to happen if I can prevent it. I may not have trusted my Shin no Kankaku vibe sense until now, but I have been practicing other applications to use with my Shinten. I've been incorporating them in with my Jiku style. I've learned to vibrate my body at unheard of speeds, not the speed of light or anything. That might actually cause a black hole for all I know. That much accumulated mass in one place. If that didn't do it, the first time I tried to move, adding kinetic force to my already near infinite mass, definitely would. No, I'll probably never try for, let alone achieve vibration at light speed, but I've definitely reached supersonic speeds, Mach 3 at least, with better chakra control. I could probably reach Mach 6. I can vibrate all or parts of my body at Mach 3, which adds plenty of mass. I think today, I'll do it to my whole body, really drive it home for my bae, that we're clever too. Hinata landed a few feet back from her position. Vibe Freak 3, Shin Mhin-san, she declared, and her entire body began vibrating at 3 times the speed of sound. Hinata was barely visible, and the second her vibrating body broke the sound barrier, there was a sonic boom, which could be heard all over the village, and broke several windows in the village. 8 trigrams. Twin palms, came her now distorted voice as she lunged, driving both palms forward. They came into contact with something invisible. The force shocked it out of its unseen technique, and there was an approximation of pain on the Naruto lookalike's handsome face before the force of Hinata's attack destroyed his Senko Bunshin in a rainbow shower of waves and particles. By this time, the real Naruto was sitting up as the kekkei finished healing him. He was looking at her with astonishment written all over his face. Hinata just grinned. You may be invisible, Naruto-kun, she answered his questioning face, but we still have our other senses. As someone who trained his senses with the Inyazuka, you should be ashamed for not taking better precautions with the other markers of your passage. You still move the air around you when you travel, don't you know? There was a humorous laughter coming from her right. They looked, and there standing with a shocked Kurenai-sensei, Sakura-san, was the third Hokage who was clapping his hands. He walked over to stand next to the Haiku heiress. You are quite correct, my dear, he agreed with her and looked at his surrogate grandson. He may have been unseen, but he is still there, he is just hiding behind a curtain. Naruto stood up and marched toward the heiress. When he got there he promptly bowed. "Thank you, Hinata-chan, I fear that I had become cocky." Then he gave her a self-deprecating smile, before adding, "Thank you for taking the time to pop my oversized head." "Yes, Hiruzen agreed, and I believe congratulations are in order." Hinata, though she was overjoyed and embarrassed about the praise, looked confused. "You are the first person, besides Naruto-kun, to ever destroy a Senko Bunshin, and the first time was by accident, over a month ago." Naruto shuddered as he put his arm around his teammate, after getting her permission of course. "Man, that last attack was something else, it's a good thing flash clones don't bleed. Imagine the mess it would make if you used it on an animal." Hinata laughed. "I don't have to imagine, I know, one of the first times I tried that attack was against a side of beef in one of the Haikta meat packing plants. I wanted to see what kind of damage I could do." The two boys, grandson and grandfather, looked at her rapt with fascination as she continued, "It destroyed the already dead animal, there wasn't anything left of the thing when I was done. You're also right in the mess it made, I had to clean for hours and of course pay the owner for the lost time and money the product would have gained for him." Kurenai and Sakura had started over with the sandaime when something else caught their eyes. They made their way over to a tree. Sticking out of that tree was a handle, the hilt of a kunai. It was the kunai Hinata had thrown to distract Naruto from her real attack. How did she do this? Sakura wondered. This kunai was as dull as a spoon. "We did that to make sure we did not hurt Hinata if she wasn't as sure of her vibe sense as we believed." Kurenai thought for a moment and realization dawned on her face. "Remember when the kunai became distorted, right before she threw it?" Sakura nodded and Kurenai continued, "I noticed the same distortion around Hinata's body just before she destroyed the flash clone. From the alteration of her voice, I know she was vibrating at supersonic speeds. Well, if she can do that with her body, which is more fragile than metal, why wouldn't she be able to do it with the metal of the kunai?" she reasoned. Sakura walked around to the back of the tree and gasped, "Kurenai-sensei, you have got to come see this," she exclaimed. Kurenai hurried around to her student and added her own gasp, while taking a startled step back with an arm over her heart in shock. Because, while the front of the tree remained largely intact, the back, where all the unspent energy was released, had been demolished. The tree was one of the older trees of the forest, which means it was one of the thicker examples of its species in this part of the forest. The entire back half of the tree had been blown away. There were splinters the size of her pinky, sticking into several trees at least 20 yards behind it, and not just into the bark, there were some of them actually protruding through the entire wood of the tree. If Hinata can do this with a blunt kunai, what the hell could she do with a properly sharpened one, or a properly sharpened shuriken? Sakura wondered out loud. "That's nothing," her sensei told her, with her Byakugan, along with her vibration techniques, and a senbon in her hand, with any of her chakra natures, she'll become a walking force of nature. "It'll be perfect for her sensory genjutsu training," Kurenai mused, as her sensei, "it's my duty to open her eyes to these things. Let's go, we have 5 more months before the Chunin exams, but I won't recommend our team until we've begun C-rank missions," Kurenai stated as she walked to her 2 students. "The sandaime had already departed, and we have a lot of work to do before I'll believe you're ready." Sakura-chan was not only surviving the distance between her mother and father, she was thriving without being under their thumb. While she still acted like a lady in most situations, she had been under the influence of Anko Mitarashi, who had succeeded in relaxing the strict upbringing the Rosette took from the Harunos. Conversely, Sakura succeeded in doing the one thing to Anko that nobody had ever done before, make her mind her manners. While still a rough, earthy, uncouth character, which anybody who has spent a good deal of time with her knows is just a defense, coping mechanism to try keeping people at a distance after what her sensei did to her, which she does not even remember. It has not worked because despite her nature, Anko Mitarashi has developed a whole platoon of precious people that will stick by her and defend her until death takes them from her. The opposite is also true with Anko in how she regards her precious ones. None have become quite as dear to the snake mistress of Konoha as the pink-haired Kunoichi she took under her wing at the age of 10. They have moved in together and it seems more like they are long-lost sisters than roommates. The dynamics of the living situation are private and not fodder for discussion here, but Anko, in addition to training her own team, which since they all come from clans, largely consists of shoring up their taijutsu styles, learning chakra affinities. Kiba is fire, Sasuke is lightning, and Shino is earth, and getting them started with genin level chakra control. She mostly had them practicing teamwork exercises and physical fitness training. During team meetings, they spent less time training together than the other teams and had a professional relationship, at most. Alternatively, they spent more time on D-rank missions than training and by mutual consent had Sasuke as their lead. Kiba was a natural follower though not a bootlicker and Shino did not really care who led. Sasuke was pretty good at it, he seemed to be a natural leader and all in all they were a pretty strong team. But Anko spent most of her and Sakura's free time training Sakura in taijutsu and introducing her to different weapons. mostly staff and sword techniques, but also in the use of spears, double sword techniques, which paired well with her storm art training, but more on that later. Mother and son Choken, butterfly sword techniques, 3-section staff training, horse bench training, which was about finding and using everyday objects as weapons, and twin rod training, which also paired well with Arashi no Jutsu. Anko introduced Sakura to a different style of martial discipline, which perfectly utilized the sensual flexibility of Hebe style, but added loads of power to her strikes and tons of versatility. It's called Chuin style. The essence of the style is 5 attacks in an instant, 3 heights and 8 directions, long and short range attacks, flexible foot and leg work, and all simultaneously accomplished in a single second. Sakura acquired first-class powerful kicks, but was in no way restricted to kicking alone. The footwork is elusive and flexible, with powerful, short-range fists. Training in Chuin concentrated on building a tremendous amount of stamina, as well as development of power and flexibility in the legs. Sakura would learn one posture at a time, until all 3 heights and 8 directions were mastered, only then would the next posture be taught. Weight training, iron rings, and stone locks were used, in addition to Naruto's GR. The seals, for the development of strength, stamina, and speed. Sakura practiced all of her techniques on Senko Bunshin and trees, which was a terrific training aid to building power into her punches and kicks. Because she passed through a stage in her training, she had to develop a considerable amount of power before progressing further. Sakura started out learning basic hand patterns and stances, which developed whipping power and spiraling motions. Then she learned kicks, developing the 7 sides of the foot. After that, she learned balance, rooting, and how to develop power from the waist. She learned to harmonize hands and feet, and developed flexible stepping methods and handwork, learning what she called Kitsui Thmhm, which made her hands and feet by themselves deadly weapons, without using chakra. Sakura also learned Kurenai's family Taijutsu style, a Kijujutsu, whose movements were so similar to Uzumaki style Taijutsu, as to make him and Yugao both wonder if there might be a familial link between the Ikki and the Uzumaki clans. Sakura spent a couple of days per week at the hospital, learning how to be a medical ninja. Hinata and Naruto accompanied her for certain classes, but not others. The hospital was Sakura territory, and they both understood that. She saw her best friend, Ino, there, which was the only time they had to spend together, with their busy schedules. Ino was the only person Sakura told about her actions in the academy and her attitude toward Naruto. Ino knew about Anko and their training together. The Yamanaka helped Sakura with her deception of her parents by fomenting a pseudo-rivalry for Sasuke's affections, of which only Ino's feelings for him were genuine. Well, as genuine as they can be for a preteen girl, which in Ino's case lasted until her 3rd day on her team, and no, she did not switch her affections to Shisui. He was in her opinion an old man. Her attentions were now firmly affixed upon another boy. Biba was also training to be a medical ninja. He always enjoyed working with all animals, not just dogs. He hoped to learn enough to work with his sister, Hana, at her veterinary clinic. On the same week, the first month went into the second. Naruto and Sakura were walking on their way to meet Anko and Yugao. They had been training together working on their kekkei genkai, Naruto his 3, and Sakura's 1. Naruto, to maintain his kekkei tota's status as an S-rank secret, could only practice his Kidoton at home. Naruto was developing something he could use with his magnet release. It was going to be used with Senbon. He was not sure what to even call it yet, but he would have it ready for the upcoming Chunin exams. He was also developing a special throwable container that could be used with his explosive chakra. They might be closer to completion in 3 more months. Naruto's plasma chakra was the most useful and the most developed of his kekkei genkai, and what was truly exciting for both members of Team Blood was both of their bloodlines were mirror twins of each other. The only real differences between the two were purely cosmetic. The spectra of light they emitted were different. Plasma release jutsu always ran the gamut between red and green. Storm release jutsu were always running between green and violet spectra. Other than that, they were perfect twins of each other. Sakura was phenomenal at finding variations in the jutsu Naruto already created. Naruto showed her how to make a plasma blade. She took the idea a step further and created storm whips with differing variations of whips, from cat o' nine tails to bullwhip configurations. He showed her his most devastating plasma technique, which he called a ruby-eyed god, where he spun the plasma into a very compact, angry scarlet sphere. They were out at training ground 100, the farthest point away from Konoha one could get before becoming a missing nin. There was a mountain down range of the couple. There were several cylindrical holes drilled through it. You could see sunlight coming through from those holes. Naruto twisted around and thrust his palms toward the crag. A beam of energy shot away from the shinobi's hand and headed straight for the rock. When it struck, something Naruto was not expecting happened. The top portion of the mountain just went away, vaporized, converted from matter to energy in an instant. That was expected. What was not expected was the amount of the mountain that was destroyed. He had expected a neat little hole, not Kami's wrath. He moved back through his memories and compared it to previous episodes, which is where he found the difference. In the past the beam would shrink in circumference the closer it came to the mountain and the further it went from him. It retained its intensity, but reduced in size. The only damage the mountain received was a small hole. Naruto chuckled in derision and said, "This is the difference between the Academy Chakra Control exercise and what we're learning now." Naruto, with the help of Sakura, learned to dial it back so it was now anti-personnel, not anti-mountain, and she developed her own version, which was Violet, that she called Angel's Judgment. It was Sakura who came up with plasma constructs. She got the idea from her medical training, where a ninja, if they are out of kunai and shuriken, needs to perform emergency surgery, so they formed the cutting tools from pure chakra. Plasma or Rashi constructs work the same way, just made from plasma and storm art filaments, as Sakura took to calling them. Kunai and shuriken are a finite resource, Naruto-kun, she explained to him. There may come a time when we run out of them, but still need them. We can use our jutsu to make them from our chakra. Chakra, as long as we remain alive, is replenished every second of every day of our lives. She explained this as she twirled a storm art made kunai in her hands. It seemed to act like the metal one in her other hand. Then she threw the metal one at a tree, followed by the glowing one. On impact, the filament created kunai struck the tree, just as the metal kunai did. "That's way cool, Sakura-chan," Naruto marveled. "If either of us ever recreated the Yondame's Hiraishin, there's no telling where we could come from." The other jutsu Sakura created, but Naruto decided not to emulate, was the Arashi Bunshin no Jutsu. It had all of the same capabilities as the Kage and Senko Bunshins, but it was not as durable as Flash clones. They could take a lot of punishment, but they were easier to destroy than Naruto's invention. Naruto did not want to learn it because he felt he had all the clones he needed. "This is your invention, Sakura-chan," Naruto said as he looked in her eyes, flicking a lock of hair to the side. "You should be recognized for using it and nobody else. This actually helps both of us, Sakura-chan." "What do you mean, Naruto-kun?" the Rosette asked. "This means I can teach you either the Kage Bunshin technique or my Senko Bunshin," Naruto answered. "Tsunade-sama made me promise not to teach them to you or Hinata-chan because of the chakra requirements. But your storm clones use as much chakra as the shadow clones and my flash clones," Naruto informed her. "You've made 50 so far and you're not even winded. If you can do that, it means you're ready for either type of clone," Naruto concluded. He smirked at her and asked, "So which one do you want to learn, Sakura-chan?" "I won't teach you both. It's payment for letting me use plasma constructs." Sakura smiled a beautiful smile. "You have to ask, flash me, baby." The way she said it made Naruto blush. Her smile changed into a leer and her voice turned seductive. "Get your mind out of the gutter, one thing at a time, dear. Teach me, then screw me." He blushed even heavier and she just giggled. She had definitely lived with Anko Mitarashi for far too long. They were standing outside of a novelty weapons shop. Something had caught their eyes as they walked by. Several items, to be exact, full body, chainmail armor, but woven together in a scale-like pattern with claws protruding from the gloves. They went inside and talked to the clerk. They're called dragon mail. When worn, they conform to the relative sizes of the wearer and offer the same protection as samurai armor without compromising the flexibility needed for your shinobi duties. They offer Kunoichi a fair amount of modesty without losing any feminine allure. He raised his hands to hurriedly add, "I am not one of those people who believes Kunoichi are whores. My mother was one, and I know how tenacious she and her Kunoichi peers were in a fight, but you cannot deny the power of a female body. They have been used to distract many a guard," he qualified, and even Sakura could not deny his proposition in this regard, so he went on with his explanation of the product. In addition to enhancing one's taijutsu, the claws are mutable with just a small expenditure of chakra, allowing the dexterity necessary to wield weapons or make hand signs. Whether you want spikes protruding from the knuckles or other parts of the armor, it is as easy as using the Henj no Jutsu, and incidentally, no ninjutsu or jinjutsu is compromised while wearing it. Naruto was looking thoughtful when he asked, "How much?" The clerk smiled at the opportunity to make a sale and said, "We're actually having a clearance sale this week. The owners are selling the place, so everything is half off. That means I can sell it to you for 100 ryo apiece." Naruto smiled. With all the D ranks he has had lately and not having to pay or enter anything, he was flush with cash. "In that case, 5 sets," he said while looking at his teammate, "one for each of my teammates and my auntie." Sakura had been interested in the armor as well, but now that she was living on her own, she had to watch every dime. She did have rent to pay after all, and such extravagant things, like exotic weapons and armor, were an expense she could not justify. Then she heard what Naruto-kun said. "What, Naruto-kun, I don't need your charity," she snapped. "I'm not giving it to you out of charity," Naruto answered. "You're my family, friends and teammates, and my affections for all 3 of you ladies is growing. You've all more or less confessed your feelings for me, but I can't choose either of you because that wouldn't be fair to Kurenai-sensei." I'm not going to date any of you until Kurenai-san is no longer our sensei. Due to the zero-tolerance fraternization law between sensei and student, she can't be as open with her affections for me as the rest of you. So, this is my way of evening the playing field and answering all your feelings for me without endangering her career, and because I'm getting myself a set as well as Yugao Oba-chan shows that I regard your lives to be at least equal to my own and hers. Sakura's eyes had gone wide at the level of Naruto's thought process. He is so thoughtful, he's pretty much just told me that he feels the same for us as we do for him, but he's doing it in a way to protect us and conceivably give all of us a fair chance to win his heart. Flashback end now. Naruto presented all of us the dragon mail on the same day and told us the same thing he told Sakura when we asked him why he was doing it. I didn't think I could love him any more than I already did, but the thoughtfulness of the armor, his consideration for our feelings and making sure we all had a fair chance to court him, not to mention protect my career, proved how wrong I was. When I look down at my armor, I can't help but feel as if he is holding me in his arms. It makes me feel safe wearing his armor. I then look down to my thigh to the twin hanbo, that is a symbol from my Kunoichi students, to my shinobi student, and to me, that we are under a truce in regard to pursuing a romantic relationship. Until I am able to make a fair campaign to win Naruto's heart when we are no longer bound by a teacher-student relationship. The Hokage's office. There was a knock on the door. The door opened and Blood Squad filed into the Hokage's office. There was a Tsunade sitting behind her desk, which was empty of the dreaded paperwork, except of course for mission reports and incomplete missions. There was, off to the side, another Hokage desk with another Tsunade, which was cluttered with all of the paperwork the real slug princess did not want to do. Tsunade raised her head and smiled. "Ah, Team Blood, are you here for another D rank?" she said, waving her hand in front of a stack of scrolls. "As you can see, we're overflowing with them." Kurenai was wearing her dragon mail armor under her blouse, with only the right sleeve visible, a very broad material, which resembles bandages with a pattern on it, similar to those of rose thorns. Her arms and legs were also completely covered by Naruto's dragon mail armor, and she wears the Konoha forehead protector and regular shinobi sandals. She wore makeup consisting of red lipstick and purple eyeshadow. Naruto and Hinata had their balaclavas down, and Sakura had unwrapped her shema, their own dragon armor covering all exposed skin, from the neck down. One amenity to the armor is with just a little chakra, the wearer could add a few cosmetic changes, such as altering the color and adding a specific design or an emblem to it. For instance, Kurenai made the armor over her chest and down her left leg, the same shade of red as her right sleeve, while extending the design and color of the rest of her clothing to her left arm and right leg. Sakura's armor was a solid red hue, which was slightly lighter in color than her sensei. Hinata had chosen a plum-colored hue, and Naruto had decided on an alternating scale pattern that continued the blue camouflage pattern on his shirt. Only one of them had decided to use any kind of spiking. Hinata kept the backs of her hands and fingers down to the first knuckle covered in small spikes, which she mostly uses to conduct her Raiten chakra. Though Naruto had placed special storage seals on the palms of their armor that allowed them to call forth their ninja tools in either hand, ready to use at a moment's notice, thus none of them wore ninja tool pouches. They were all dressed in the genin uniforms they had chosen before becoming a team, though to reflect a united front, all of them including Kurenai were wearing crimson forehead protectors in the same spots they chose to at the academy. In another act of unity, but for a different, more personal reason, strapped to their left outer thighs, all of Blood Squad, including their sensei, had outfitted a pair of hanbo. They were the Kunoichi's answer gifts to Naruto's armor. They all chipped in and bought them from the same weapons store as the armor. Using chakra, the wielder could transform the hanbo into various bludgeons, from nunchaku to bow staffs of various lengths, even a pair of kama with the blades growing from the haft. On Sakura and Naruto's right hips, in a leather belt and holster was a strange L-shaped contraption, called a blaster. They were made of chakra metal according to Naruto, who had the device commissioned from a weaponsmith and aided them in aiming their respective bloodlines with pinpoint accuracy. Sakura wore a shoulder harness and on the upper section of her chest, outboard of her breasts, one pointing down and one pointing up were her sai. Kurenai looked at her students and noted their bearing, waiting for her to speak for them. They are disciplined, they might just be ready, she thought. Hokage-sama, it is my humble belief the Blood Squad is ready to accept their first C-rank mission, Kurenai declared. She was doing her best to conceal her pride in her kids, as she has come to see them, for truly, she feels like a proud mother about to let go of her babies. Tsunade finished her private assessment and agreed with a nod. If you believe it, then so do I. She buzzed her intercom. Natsume, please send in Tazuna-san. The door to the Hokage's waiting area opened and an old man entered. He was a gray-haired, bespectacled man with a large beard and dark eyes. Tazuna wore a sleeveless V-neck shirt with an obi, pants and a pair of sandals, a towel around his neck, and wore a pointed hat on his head. He stopped just inside the door, eyeing the room with a critical eye. "What is this?" I asked for ninja, not kunoichi, he slurred, before opening an unseen jug, tipped his head back, and began to chug. When he finished, he stoppered the jug and wiped his mouth on the back of his hand, then added, "This is going to require a lot more prowess than an invitation to the bedroom." The kekkei directed at the bridge builder by everybody in the room instantly sobered him up. "Are you calling me a whore, bridge builder?" Tsunade stood and marched over, getting in the old man's face. "Because I am a kunoichi too, and I'll have you know, I've fought and defeated people that would make you piss your pants. I fought in 2 great ninja wars and countless smaller wars, battles, skirmishes, and incidental missions since I became a kunoichi at 11 years old. Also, not that it's any of your business, the only man I have ever lain with was my fiancé, and no one else since he died in service to this village," she yelled in his face. "Now, would you like to get on with explaining this mission for these ninja?" she asked in a much calmer voice. "But I warn you, one more crack about my people, of any kind, we will cancel this mission, and you will have to find another village to employ, and that includes during the journey back to your homeland. Are we clear, Tazuna-san?" Tazuna bowed his head toward the Hokage. "I apologize, Hokage-sama," he declared, then bowed to the others he saw in the room, "and my apologies to you all, what I said was uncalled for, and if anybody else said the same thing about my daughter, I would do my best to murder the rat bastard. I humbly ask for you to forgive me." Tazuna's contrition was sincere, as far as Naruto and Hinata could determine. Naruto remained silent, he was only insulted by association. It is the kunoichi on his team who had the right to accept or deny his request for forgiveness. Thank Kami, he grew up living with a kunoichi and knew how most of them thought. They neither needed nor wanted a man to come to their defense in matters of honor. These deadly women could see to their own honor. "Thank you very much." Kurenai, Hinata, Sakura, and Tsunade shared a look, an unreadable glance, and they all gave a subtle nod and turned back to the client. "You are forgiven, Tazuna-san." Kurenai-sensei graciously accepted his apology, but added, "But be warned, any further insults from you or even those close to you, and even in the midst of battle, we will depart and leave you to your own fate." "I understand, Kunoichi-kun," Tazuna nodded. "Now before I put my foot in my mouth again, may I explain my mission?" The entire team nodded this time, and he began. "My nation of Wave has always been a poor nation, but happy. We're not big at all. We have less landmass than even some cities, but are fiercely protective of our independence. That independence is now being threatened by a very small man who casts a very large shadow, the business tycoon, Gato of Gato Trading Company." The eyes of all grew wide at that name. Besides skills, all of them were up to date on current events around the world, and the name Gato was seen in quite a number of newspaper, magazine, and current events websites. Tsunade already knew all of this. No mission goes through without thorough vetting, and her sources are numerous, which included, among other things, Jireya's spy network. "I see I don't have to explain who this man is to you." Tazuna nodded. "Good, that saves us time." A year or so ago, Gato entered Nami no Kuni and began buying up shipping companies and dock space. Even commercial fishing assets were bought out. Every square footage of waterfront property fell under his control. As, I'm sure you are aware, to a nation like Wave, entirely dependent upon its seafront real estate, owning that property puts a stranglehold on our economy, on our very lives. As soon as Gato finalized his monopoly in Wave, he began strangling our poor nation, the way a python would its prey. In order to break his monopoly, I began building a bridge that would connect Wave Island to Hai no Kuni. Tazuna finished his story, then his face turned dark, followed by his face, but Gato will do anything to maintain his grip on Wave. I think he wants to be elevated to the status of daimyo. Even as one of the wealthiest men in the world, there is still only so much he can accomplish, but as royalty he can do so much more. Tsunade scoffed. "Even if he does become daimyo, if he proves himself to be too troublesome, the other nations, most likely our very own Fire Nation, because of our proximity, will just gobble him up." Tazuna nodded, as he had thought of that as well. "That is also my thought, but either way, the people of Wave would be caught like grain between the millstone and the trough. Which is all the more of a reason to finish my bridge before it's too late." "Why doesn't Gato just wait until it's finished and then blow it up?" Naruto asked. "That might disillusion other people from trying that again." "If it were a bridge within a nation, you'd be correct, Naruto-kun," Tsunade explained. "However, there is a certain etiquette involving bridges connecting between nations. If Gato attacks the bridge after completion, then it will be seen as an attack on both nations," she continued. "Fire would retaliate by sending more of us to back the upstart off and teach him a lesson." "That's right," Tazuna stated somberly, "but until it is complete, the bridge is the sole responsibility of the nation that began the project, hence why Gato is getting desperate to prevent my bridge's completion. So much so that he has begun to hire ninja to try and stop me from completing it," he stated, finally getting to the reason for his presence. "I need help from the Leaf to guard me and my family as I complete my bridge." Forgive me, Hokage-sama, but how is this a C-rank mission? Hinata asked. If these truly are ninja, then shouldn't this be a B rank, even borderline A rank, depending upon the caliber of ninja we face? Tsunade grinned ruefully. Normally you'd be right, Hikagenin-san, delicately reminding Hinata of her place, but Tazuna-san cannot afford anything higher than a C rank, and this is a golden opportunity for Fire Nation to acquire another trade route. The genin of Blood Squad stared straight ahead. Is that all she cared about? The money this mission could bring to Fire, which would only be true if they succeeded. They stared straight ahead, not bothering to look at their Hokage. It was such a striking reversal of her attitude at the beginning of the meeting. She seemed to go from a caring benevolent leader to a callous one in just a few moments that it made them wonder something. Quietly, they stopped the flow of their chakra and found a bit of foreign chakra running through their chakra coils. They recognized it as belonging to their sensei. They allowed their chakra to start flowing again, which broke them out of the genjutsu. As one, they turned their faces to their sensei in a subtle glare, but she only had a mysterious smile, indicating for them to pay attention. They turned resolutely back to look at their Hokage, who was still at the beginning of what she was saying. Normally you'd be correct, Hinata-san. The Hokage grinned, noting the final test their sensei gave them to ensure they were ready. They could be covert if it was necessary. Then she continued, but Tazuna-san cannot afford anything higher than a C rank. And this is a golden opportunity for Fire Nation to acquire Wave Nation through annexation, which will bring them under fire laws and remove Gato's ownership of the waterfront property and bring it under our daimyo's control. To ensure this, Konoha will be sending a pair of Anbu along with you, Tsunade finished. There was a chuckle and a giggle as Naruto and Hinata grinned knowingly. That's very clever, Hokage-sama, they said together. So glad you both approve, Tsunade said dryly. Will that not drive up the price? Tazuna asked with concern. Not at all, Tazuna-san, Sakura spoke up for the first time. You see, Anbu base pay is a part of Konoha infrastructure, whereas other ninja, from genin to genin, get paid directly through missions. Tsunade-sama is giving us the best chance for success by including 2 Anbu in our team, the Rosette Kunoichi explained. She's giving you more bang for your buck, so to speak. Who will be accompanying us? Hokage-sama, Kurenai asked. Tsunade grinned. Suki, Moon, Nico, Kat, make yourselves known, she ordered. There were a couple of blurs in the room, and before the Hokage had closed her mouth, 2 Anbu, Shinobi and Kunoichi stood before their commanding officer. Hi, Hokage-sama. Are you two ready? Tsunade asked. When they nodded, good, you are going on a mission with Blood Squad here, but while it is important, we don't want our adversaries knowing how important, therefore you will go dressed as normal genin. Understood. Understood, they chorused, and they performed a hand sign, and their clothes seemed to melt around them, only to reform an instant later into the standard genin uniform. They turned after completing the transformation, and Naruto's aunt and her boyfriend faced them all. They had used true transformations to alter their clothes for the mission parameters, while the Kunoichi used the summoning technique to bring a particular item from where she kept it into her hands. Yugao looked the same as she always did. Naruto could see the dragon armor under the long-sleeved jonin pullover sweater, except her violet hair was in a Kunoichi braid, and the Uzumaki family katana, which she had summoned, settled into place, peeking over her shoulder. It looked just like any other katana, but the tsuba was an ovular onmum symbol. The man standing next to her was a well-respected Takubetsu genin named Heiichi. Heiichi had short brown hair, dark-colored eyes, and dark markings under his eyes. He also carried a katana strapped over his back with a rectangular handguard. Oh, thank Kami, Naruto stated in relief, another shinobi will be along for this mission. Most of the Kunoichi turned a glare onto the male genin, but it was Sakura who spoke. What's that supposed to mean, Naruto-kun? It means, Sakura-chan, not backing down at all. He told her what he meant, that as much as I admire and respect all Kunoichi, especially my teammates, not to mention my aunt, I sometimes feel that I'm adrift in a sea of estrogen. Plus, once a month, one or more of you seems to decide that I need to be mentally and emotionally tortured just for being a man, Naruto added, then sighed and inhaled through his nose. One of the drawbacks of having an enhanced sense of smell is I can always tell which of you is on your period or which one of you is in heat. Naruto was deliberately looking at the ceiling to avoid making eye contact with either of the women, who had turned red when they realized they hid nothing from their teammate and/or love interest or nephew. Why not stand upwind of them, Naruto? Tsunade asked out of medical curiosity, then you won't smell them. If only it were that simple, Hokage-sama, Naruto sighed, but one of the drawbacks to mastering your element, as you may know, is you are subconsciously manipulating that chakra element to benefit yourself. Earth specialists tend to leave a wake in the dirt wherever they walk, even on stone. Fire users are a little warmer than normal, water ninja tend to humidify the air, and lightning masters are more prone to static electricity. Tsunade and the other genin nodded their heads, the other genin listened with fascination, and the civilian looked interested. Well, wind masters like me tend to alter the local air currents to draw in the winds they need to work with, so no matter where I stand, I'm always downwind. Why did you not tell us this before, Naruto? His aunt asked dangerously. Realizing he was in trouble no matter what he said, he decided to bite the senbon and just tell the truth. I did it to keep from embarrassing you, Naruto said, studiously ignoring Tazuna in the room. I apologize for blurting it out here in front of Tazuna, but I was so relieved to finally have another shinobi to talk to on my first mission that I blurted it out. Before further discussion could be had, Tsunade decided to get them back on track, getting to the other subject at hand. Blood Squad is to accompany Tazuna-san here, back to Nami, and guard him until he finishes his bridge. You are authorized to use any and all means to prevent his demise. She was looking directly at Naruto when she said that. He quirked an eyebrow, looking at Tsunade to make sure he understood what she was authorizing when she emphasized any means short of assassination of Geto. If he attacks directly, you may do what you must, but until then he is to be left alone. Is that understood? She asked. Understood, they all said. Good, Kurenai-sensei, Tsunade said, give them their marching orders. Hi, Hokage-sama, the crimson-eyed Kunoichi acknowledged, before turning to her team and began giving them orders. You will all go home and pack everything you will need for an extended trip. Meet me at the village main gate in exactly 1 hour. They waited for her to finish her instructions and give the execute order. Go. They were a memory as soon as her mouth closed. They did not see her smile of pride in them. You will all become great ninja. I am just glad I could have been a part of your story. New traditions. Naruto and Yugao wasted no time getting to the house. As they entered the house they headed to their respective rooms. They really did not have to do much preparation because one of the village's standing orders for all ninjas was to be able to set out on a mission at a moment's notice. That meant having what they needed for a mission ready at all times, ready to go immediately upon receipt of the mission. The hour Kurenai gave them was generous. It was mainly so they could settle any business they might have while they were away early or schedule for a later date. Naruto picked up a large scroll in his room. Into it he sealed clothes, rations, medical equipment. They may not be medic nin like Sakura-chan, but all of them knew how to do emergency medicine. The doorbell rang. Yugao called out that she would get it. He heard the door open and several feet file into the house. Naruto, of course, was wearing his 10-fist sword on his back, which he always did since becoming a genin. He was just stopping by the foyer to lay his scroll next to the door before making his way to the living room. He smiled when he reached it because he found nearly everybody he cared about: Anko, Sakura-chan, Hade, Hinata-chan, Kiba with Akamaru, Hana with the triplets, and Kurenai-chan, seated on the couches or in various chairs within the room. They were all engrossed in their own talk. Sakura, Kurenai, and Hinata were chatting and casting surreptitious glances in Naruto's direction. Kiba was laughing at something with Anko and Hana while scratching the back of his head. To Naruto, he seemed to be flirting with Anko. Yugao and Hade were just sitting in the lavesiate, lost in their own little world. The Inunin were laying on their sides in their own little pile. Akamaru and the Himaru triplets were brothers from the same sire. Naruto cleared his throat and smiled before asking, "Hi, guys, what are you doing here?" he asked with enthusiasm. Hana is the one to answer his question. Your aunt invited us over to take part in an Uzumaki clan tradition, she explained. It's a tradition that usually only involves family, but she said we're family in every way that matters. Naruto understood his aunt's thoughts on that matter. Well, she's right there, he agreed. You may not be Uzumaki, but you've all become like family to us, he said, as he entered the room to stand next to his teammates. This prompted Yugao to stand up from Hate's lap and begin bustling around the room. She went to the sideboard and took a tray of drinks and went around the room putting a shot glass into every hand. The shots were of sake, okay, this is a tradition the Uzumaki would partake in when they became adults and began to take their place in society. With Blood Squad about to undertake its first mission outside the village, this seemed to be the perfect opportunity to do this. So, if you will all raise your glasses, they all did, to Blood Squad on their first mission. May we represent our village with honor. Blood Squad, formidable while separate, unbeatable together, Naruto toasted. Blood Squad, give them hell, Kiba decreed, but come back safely, together. Here, Hana agreed to her brother's benediction. The Blood Squad, may we all earn each experience, but never give up that which makes us strong, our uniqueness, Hade declared. The Blood Squad on our first mission, we will destroy our foes and look good doing it, Sakura quipped. The Blood Squad on their first mission, Geto won't know what hit him, Anko declared. My team, no matter what happens, we will get through anything together, Kurenai decreed, and one more standing order for you all, no dying. The Sakura-chan, Naruto-kun, and Kurenai-sensei, we will make the mountains tremble with our passage and rivers slow as we cross them, Hinata exclaimed, our story will be epic, and they all drank their sake. On to wave. The original Blood Squad were many hours outside the village hidden in the leaves. At the moment, the only ones present were Naruto, Sakura, Hinata, and Kurenai, not to mention Tazuna of Nami. The two Anbu were nowhere in sight. Naruto could not help the grin on his face. This was his first excursion out of Konoha in his whole life. Of course, he and Hinata knew they were being followed and had been since the moment they set foot outside the village. Naruto and Hinata's balaclavas were totally on and up, their visors were flipped down over their eyes, and their dijutsu were on in full. Hinata was on point, while Naruto brought up the rear, Kurenai and Sakura were on the right and left of Tazuna-san, respectively, while the two Anbu were nowhere to be seen. It may be worth noting that all three of Naruto's ninjutsu, surrogate substitution, true transformations, and flash clones had been sold to the Anbu Corps, which brought a nice chunk of change to the Uzumaki compound and had also been included in the scroll of seals as Kenjutsu. They knew what the two following them looked like and even who they are, Maizu and Gozu, Aka, the demon brothers, missing ninja from Kurigakure. They were known to associate with the S-rank missing ninja, JKZM Biwa, the wielder of Kubikurumjim. JKZM by himself was reputed to be a near nightmare to fight, but JKZM, plus the severing sword, was said to dye the battlefields red with blood. It was late afternoon and in the midst of a particularly hot summer when Naruto sensed something insulting. The demon brothers had apparently grown tired of following them and decided to ambush them. That was not the insulting part, that came in the form of their chosen cover. The brothers were trying to show off their training and chose to hide their ambush by hiding in a puddle of freestanding water. The only problem with that tactic, it had been weeks since it rained. This was the dry season in the Land of Fire. One of the reasons it was called that was due to its unusually high temperatures in the summer. The second hottest on the continent, with only the desert lands of Kase no Kuni going higher and drier. If they were true ninja, they would have taken this into their calculations when setting their ambush. So, what should we do about them? Kurenai asked her genin over the special communication devices given to them by Hana and Kiba as first mission gifts. They allowed the Inyazuka's non-canine partners to communicate with them, taking their voices and modulating the sound up and down the frequency scale, allowing humans without special abilities granted by the king of the Biju or a bloodline limit to communicate freely. Kurenai had her own ideas, but wanted to see what her students thought of the situation. Should we spring their ambush or allow it to go forward? Well, springing the ambush would reveal our capabilities and some of our abilities. Naruto pointed out the obvious, which he knew they knew, but wanted to point it out to determine the likely consequences of such actions. They nodded their understanding, and it is most likely these idiots were sent to test us. A guy like Biwa-san wouldn't want to waste his time on small fry. True, but letting it go forward will not accomplish anything. They'll likely target Tazuna-san, and we already know why, Sakura stated. If I were to attack our group, I'd go after Kurenai-sensei first, then try a feint at one of us, before suddenly veering off toward Tazuna-san. If I didn't know anything about our capabilities, all I would see was a typical genin team on a mission, she told them as her powerful mind turned the situation over and over. Naruto-kun and Hinata-chan are dressed enough alike to likely be siblings. I'm dressed differently enough with my shema, the only one they might have heard of is you, Kurenai-sensei. Kurenai smile, it's likely, and I am in the book of shinobi as Crimson Mirage, so they likely know my method of attack will be using Jinjutsu. The first rule of strategy is never do what your enemy expects you to do, their sensei lectured, but always do what they expect you not to. Actually, the rule of thumb is to be unpredictable, Hinata corrected, and I don't see what the issue is. We know they're there. Most of the power of an ambush comes from the surprise of your enemy. There's no reason why we cannot incorporate elements from both options, Hinata reasoned. What do you have in mind, Hinata-chan? Naruto asked. By the time the party came even with the supposed innocuous puddle of water, they had shifted positions so Kurenai was bringing up the rear. They had apparently grown complacent as the journey wore on and had allowed their vigilance to wane. The two Kunoichi were in the middle, chatting about girly things. There was a lot of giggling involved in whatever they were talking about, as one or both seemed to cast conspiratorial glances in the blonde shinobi's direction, who had migrated to take point, leaving Tazuna terribly alone and isolated. The demon brothers weighed their options, wondering if they should change their battle plan, but decided against it. Their first target could not possibly be in better position for springing their trap. The entire party had walked by and were a few paces past the puddle when they rose out of the puddle, one atop the other. Once they were completely out of the water, the one on top combined a leap with a throw from the one on bottom, and together they launched the top one through the air. They ended up entangling the raven-haired beauty with a deadly-looking chain that seemed to be attached to a pair of gruesome-looking gauntlets. Oh no, Sakura exclaimed in fright. What? Came Naruto's astonished bellow. Do it, the two-horned Maizu, which was truly the only way to tell them apart, ordered, and they pulled on the chain hard. Their combined might caused the chain to rip through Blood Squad Sensei like a chainsaw through paper. Kurenai Sensei, Naruto called out in alarm before he felt the wind blow behind him as the Chunin from Mist appeared behind Naruto, laughing at his shock and fright. Now, it's your turn, one of them stated as they brought their chains up and would have wrapped it around him. Naruto suddenly smirked, psych, and he was gone in a plume of smoke, and in his place was Gozu, who just had time for his eyes to go wide before he met the same fate as Kurenai. How was that possible? Then Maizu remembered, who they had supposedly killed a moment before, a Genjutsu master, of course. Then focusing he yelled, Kai. There was a flash of light and the world returned to normal, but it was still too late, because he watched the blonde one, that they had intended to use as a feint, break his brother's nose. Gozu felt a sharp rap on the back of the head with a kunai, and the last thing he saw before consciousness fled was a flight of 6 Onmum, Canada, geese, flying sedately to the west. One of them seemed to be carrying a scroll on its back. Nightmare in the mist. The air was as opaque as a blanket, visibility was down to 0, and the wind was utterly still. It was as quiet as a tomb. Through this foggy atmosphere, a boat moved through the water. Normally this boat, a small-time fisherman's vessel too insignificant for Gato to even try to buy out, would be maneuvering through the channel between fire and wave, with its tiny motor going full blast. This morning, however, was different because as insignificant as this ferryman was in terms of acquiring businesses, it would not be the case if he were caught by Gato, helping the very man trying to break up his business venture. This auxiliary for Charon had some truly august passengers today. Nami no Tazuna, Konoha no Sakura, Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Hyuga, and Kurenai Iki were making their way to the not-so-sunny coasts of Nami no Kuni to guard Tazuna from the minions of the fiend known as Gato. An enterprise that aforementioned fiend would surely frown upon, therefore, it behooved a boatman to conduct the service as quietly as possible. This fog is so thick, you can't see anything, the Rosette Kanoichi commented, sitting on the port side gunwale, directly opposite the Hyuga. Toward the aft section of the boat was their sensei, and behind her was Tazuna directly in front of the steersman, and the bow of the boat was Naruto. Bridge isn't far, now, the ferryman's voice seemed to cut through the silence like a knife in the stomach. Our destination, the land of waves, is just ahead. Naruto's nose was not picking up much in this fog. Having his balaclava up was just a waste of time, so he kept it pushed back and down on his shoulders. Being in the front of the boat allowed him to understand the scope and scale of the bridge their client was trying to build. They passed along the bridge quite close, but even as close as they were, they could not see the top, barely making out the scaffolding and construction equipment. Whoa, it's huge, Naruto suddenly yelled. Bah, quiet, the boatman scolded. I told you, no noise. Why do you think we're traveling like this? The ferryman continued to berate the genin, turning off the engine and rowing, moving in the dense fog. It's so they don't see us. Naruto humorously clamped a hand over his own mouth. Sakura was looking at him in rebuke. Hinata was sporting a condescending smile, but Kurenai was looking hard at the bridge builder. Tazuna-san, Kurenai began like a mother chiding her child. Before we reach the pier, I want to know something. Tazuna refused to look at her. The ones who are after you, I need to know, why. If you don't tell us, this mission ends as soon as we put you ashore. After a long explanation, which was all for the ears that were definitely listening in the mists, they were sensed quite easily, with Naruto's radar sense. Well, there were only 2, and the speed with which they moved while scouting definitely said they were ninja. Their movement efficiency said they were quite skilled, both of them equaling Kurenai-sensei, while one of them moved even better than her. That one seemed to have a broad profile on one side, but a more rounded section as well. That told Naruto exactly who it was. The broad section tapered to a point on one end. Could that be the infamous Kubikurubnjm? They approached an entrance tunnel to the wharf. It would take them well into Wave Nation. Tazuna, we are very fortunate, the boatman said to the bridge builder. No one has noticed us so far. Nice going, Tazuna praised. Oh, but they have noticed us, boatman, Naruto thought. Overhead the call of geese was heard in the distance. It was the only sound that could be heard in the still atmosphere. That's the point, I'm sorry to say, but you're expendable compared to our client. As am I, Naruto thought grimly. The fog was starting to lift by the time they set foot on a lonely, secluded dock, just within sight of the Magnificent. That's as far as I go, the ferryman declared. Good luck. Right, Tazuna accepted, thank you for taking such a risk. Just be careful, the ferryman admonished as he started up his motor and sped away into the distance. Tazuna turned to the rest of the party. Okay, take me home, and I mean get me there in one piece. Of course, Kurenai confirmed. Biwa-san is definitely going to attack, he must be impatient to get paid, Naruto surmised, then chuckled to himself. He must really despise working for Gato. All articles I've read on him say that he's a real piece of work, conducting his business like a crime syndicate. Naruto was leading the way again, using his senses to tell him exactly where his adversaries were. He suddenly ran a few paces forward and stopped. He took out a kunai and threw it randomly into the bushes. Over there, he shouted, like an overeager puppy. Kurenai rushed over to the place he sent the kunai and chuckled. Good news, kids, there wasn't an enemy behind these bushes, she stated holding up a dead snow-white rabbit, extracting Naruto's kunai from its skull. Bad news, Naruto-kun is cooking dinner tonight. They all chuckled along with her, though it was on the outside only. That's a snow rabbit, Kurenai thought, but they only have white fur during winter. When snow is on the ground, it camouflages them, allowing them to escape from many of their predators. It's midsummer right now, meaning it's been raised indoors away from sunlight, which can only be for one purpose, a substitution technique. So, they're going to try us here, she decided. JKZM had been watching this group from the trees with a critical eye. He did not get to be the rank of S-rank ninja by taking chances or underestimating his opponents. While on the surface, this appeared to be your typical Konoha Genin team, the efficiency of movement the blonde one displayed spoke of considerable skill. Plus, he was able to actually inflict a mortal wound on a substituted opponent, also said a lot about his skill. It is possible there was more to him than meets the eyes. This Naruto-sensei also happens to be the famed Jinjutsu mistress of Konoha herself, second only to the Nidaime Mizukage's Jinjutsu skill. This meant fighting this group will be difficult because he will not be able to trust his senses, he will have to rely on his instincts and experience. Luckily, he had faced many Jinjutsu masters in his time, and they all added their blood to the fields he painted. I think Shiroyuki should keep the Kunoichi occupied while I keep company with the shinobi and their sensei, Biwa said, while giving a discreet flare of his chakra, much like the dot-dash code. This relayed his plan to his weapon, and when he received the confirmation code, he waited for the attack to commence. JKZM felt the moisture of the air become more oppressive, meaning his weapon was beginning the attack. Several small projectiles of water coalesced from the accumulated moisture and rushed toward the backs of the unsuspecting females. If they fell for that, then they didn't deserve to be called Kunoichi. My mother would have just called them fangirls that deserved their deaths. Just as the water needles were about to hit their mark, the one with the balaclava moved her palm and began swatting the water senbon out of the air. She moved with the grace of a dancer, her body appeared to have been encased in a shield made of air. She combined grace with dexterity. The other one, once she saw the projectiles, seemed to swim around the needles. Her torso would move in one direction, while her limbs and lower body moved the rest of her someplace else. Her style was built to entice and lead one into a trap, but there was definite power there. Mom would approve of both of them. Then Shiroyuki appeared in front of the one in the shema, sweeping at her leg, but then the one in the jacket appeared beside them, and just as her teammate began to fall, she helped her by grabbing her torso. This added a fulcrum, allowing the fall to turn into a backflip, while at the same time, the one in the balaclava threw a Raten chakra-infused punch at Shiroyuki's head. The punch that was already augmented by the metal on the backfist of the gloves, Shiroyuki's swiftly realigned head, prevented the punch from landing. The Shema wearer reached toward her thigh and drew a pair of hanbo before rushing back into the fray. She combined her taijutsu with her weapon's movements, her weapons became extensions of her body. As the fight between the Kunoichi raged, Naruto was watching from the sidelines. He could have helped them and would have, but for a few things. Firstly, if this were an attack by the enemy, it was just the opening barrage, meant to test them. The real attack from JKZM-sen could come any moment, and he would not abandon his sensei just to have some fun. Secondly, it meant that their plans were working, and finally, the movements of Sakura and Hinata's bodies said they were having fun, and both of them would flay him if he interfered. Besides, their main priority was the bridge builder. Naruto made the cross-finger sign, and 20 Bunshin appeared, surrounding Tazuna. Naruto wanted to deploy his taijutsu, but it was not yet time to reveal his trump card. I am honored, a gravelly voice said from behind them. Naruto and Kurenai whirled around at the sound. To think a lonely man like myself gets to share this dance floor with someone as lovely as the Jinjutsu mistress of Konoha. Their initial surprise was short-lived. Naruto glanced at his sensei and shook his head, which brought a nod of understanding from her. Stall. Kurenai turns to see a man, a slender and tall shinobi about the same height as the sword he wielded, standing on top of the nearby body of water, his hand and arm in an unusual formation, and from the way the water under his feet churned, he was obviously calling upon his chakra, and it was a massive Suitenjutsu. The man on the water, to Naruto, just seemed to be the personification of menace. He has not felt this feeling since he was extremely young, the 2 years he spent on the street. That was one of the most traumatic events of his life thus far. He can hardly think back on that era without remembering the ever-present feel of fear. Well, it was like someone had condensed all of that same fear from the entire period of time and coalesced it into the man standing atop the water in front of him. JKZM Biwa, also known as Nightmare from the Mist, S-ranked rogue ninja of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, who wielded decapitating carving knife. Every Kenjutsu user worth a name knew about the 7 blades of the mist, had no eyebrows, just creases under his eyes, and a cross-shaped scar on his right cheek. His hair and eyes are dark gray in color, and his hair is short and spiky. He has light tan skin. He also had a red grid-shaped marking covering his jaw. He wore a black tight-fitting sleeveless shirt with 2 light thin stripes on his chest, a striped cloth belt and light pants, along with black arm covers extending from his hands to his biceps. JKZM also wore bandages around his neck and face, which also covered his ears, and like all the members of the Seven, had pointed teeth, like a shark. Naruto knew that JKZM-sen was trying to intimidate them by intentionally releasing his killer intent, Kai, well it was, at least, working on him. The only reason he did not run away was because his love for Sakura, Hinata, and Kurenai was more powerful than the fear the swordsman extracted from him. Love always conquers fear and consumes the fires of anger and hatred with its hotter but gentler flames. Kurenai saw Naruto pluck up his courage. She was proud of her student. Not many would be able to overcome the kind of pressure Biwa-sen was exerting, let alone a genin. That's one of the reasons, among so many that make me love you, Naruto, and while I wouldn't trade this time with you for anything, I wish you were not my student so that I could, or at least try to, capture your heart. She placed all of her attention back onto their enemy and smiled a charmed smile. I am truly flattered that such a powerful shinobi such as yourself would know about a humble kunoichi like me. JKZM merely returned the smile, showing off his shark-like teeth. Of course, Kurenai, the Crimson Mirage, a Genjutsu prodigy, considered to be Konoha's #1 Genjutsu user, whose skills are said to rival those of even Shisui and Itachi Uchiha. Capable of discerning the truth in an instant and luring enemies to a place far beyond Genjutsu and into the subconscious mind to see a person's true nature and quite often mistaken for an Uchiha with those eyes of hers. They continued to appraise each other, taking their measure. He grew serious. Now that the pleasantries are over, I need you to hand over, the old man. That would be quite impossible at this juncture, Kurenai asserted. He's our client after all. It wouldn't be very good for Konoha if we started letting our clients fall into enemy hands every time we get waylaid by enemy ninja. I'm prepared to die for him, Kurenai growled, as her crimson eyes seemed to shine with an ethereal glow. Are you prepared to do the same, JKZM-san, to die for an old fart like him? Well, JKZM-san rasped, looks like I get to see the Crimson Mirage in action. This is an honor, their enemy declared solemnly. Would you show me the crimson skies I've heard from my peers? Kurenai smiled like a cat that just ate the canary. Maybe, if I deem you worthy, I have many skills, she stated, while cocking her hips to the side seductively. That Taijutsu is just one of many I possess. JKZM-san just laughed. If you're attempting to beguile me with your charms, you'll find I'm quite immune to your blandishments, unlike say the genin standing next to you. Naruto blushed. He had thought by remaining professional, no one would notice how his sensei was getting to him, but when a woman as hot as Kurenai Iki begins acting sexy, that shit is hard to ignore. Kurenai said nothing. At least, I know the guy I've fallen for finds me attractive. In truth, he is far more appealing to me than you are, Iki-san, JKZM admitted. Just give him a few years, and to me he'd be just right. Naruto, to his credit, did not blush. His aunt had raised him to be fairly open-minded about such things. Still, I'm flattered, JKZM-san, he began, but men are ugly, smelly, disgusting creatures to me, not appealing at all except as friends and comrades. As for you, Jonin-kun, JKZM-san continued, there was a standing order among all Mist Ninja to capture you and bring you back to the village or destroy you on sight. Your stats were in our bingo book, their enemy informed them, but enough talk, I must exterminate the old man, now. I just told you, JKZM-san, Kurenai repeated, that will be impossible in this place. So, taking her answer as more defiance, Kurenai-kun, it seems I need to eliminate you first, so be it. A mist even thicker than the natural fog from just an hour ago billowed into existence. Ninja art. Hidden mist jutsu. The world around them was enveloped in a thick blanket of mist that surrounded Naruto and Kurenai. They could still hear the sounds of fighting to one side as the kunoichi battle still raged. They apparently were not covered in the mist, just these two. Sensei, Naruto warned. Naruto-kun, he'll come after me first, Kurenai reminded him. Be careful, sensei, Naruto admonished, then continued in low frequency, below normal human hearing, something her earpiece picked up. Remember that tattoo on his lower jaw and lip area? At her nod he continued, I recognized it from my seal training. It's a pain seal. It was used by the Uzumaki as a ward against Genjutsu. It's a countermeasure they used. Whenever someone used a Genjutsu on a person with that mark, it flared like fire which caused the Genjutsu to fail, he explained to her. Kurenai narrowed her eyes. Don't fret, Naruto-kun, if what you're saying is true, then my Genjutsu may still work, just not the way I intended. If we fail, we only lose our lives, Kurenai concluded. Right, Naruto agreed. One of the Cage Bunshin voiced his observations. Man, this mist is getting thicker as we speak. The land of waves is surrounded entirely by the ocean, Tazuna explained, so fog and mist accumulate very easily. You could say, we're in the perfect environment for our enemy to fight us. All of the advantages are currently in his favor, but not for long. 8 points, came JKZM-san's disembodied voice, larynx, spine, lungs, the liver, jugular, and subclavian arteries, kidneys, the heart. Now, which will be my kill point, the voice asked. Kurenai made the ram seal and flared her chakra, pushing back some of the mist. Naruto, calm down. I'll protect you with my life. I would never be able to face your aunt. If I let anything happen to you, I would sooner take my own life than allow you to die. Your conviction does you credit. Crimson Mirage. JKZM-san's voice spoke from near the clone group, then JKZM appeared right next to the group. It's over. However, instead of standing their ground, they substituted themselves, but left behind several explosive kunai and only one clone. Ibukufu, the clone stated, before it exploded, adding its explosive force to the kunai. Ironically, the water clone substance leveled as much landscape as the exploding clone and kunai. Another JKZM appeared behind Kurenai and slashed his Kubikurum through her torso. Die, he yelled, but instead of that, Kurenai's body disintegrated into a shower of cherry blossoms. JKZM's face suddenly flared in pain, like it was on fire, and the genjutsu placed upon him to lure to a specific place broke. He found Kurenai waiting where she was manipulating him to be, with a kunai ready to slit his throat, and he chuckled at the shocked look on her face. I forgot to tell you, genjutsu doesn't work on me. Yeah, figured as much, she replied, then added, but then, it did exactly what I wanted it to do, distract you long enough for me to get behind you. JKZM's eyes widened when he felt the point of the kunai jabbing into the base of his skull. Don't move, JKZM-san, Kurenai ordered. Even the toughest masochistic ninja can still become distracted by pain. It takes mental concentration to ignore pain, which if I am not mistaken is the key to your ninjutsu. In order to cause all of this moisture to rise and condense, you must concentrate, and I imagine that it's a balancing act. You have to condense enough moisture out of the air to make things opaque, but too much, and it falls like rain, too little, and you won't achieve your goal. Like deceiving us into believing that this is you and not another water clone, Kurenai revealed, while looking behind her to see another JKZM-san already making his swing at her. Kurenai quickly ducked below the swing, which caused her to lose a few strands of hair, not to mention destroy the water clone, but the swing had so much force behind it that it buried itself into the earth behind JKZM. He still used the momentum of his swing to add extra power to an already powerful kick, which sent Kurenai flying. Before Kurenai even landed, JKZM grabbed the sever sword and rushed forward, moving so fast the air was whistling past his body. He spotted an obstruction and came to an abrupt stop. Makabishi spikes, she's trying to slow me down, how foolish. Kurenai went into the water, just as JKZM flipped over her little roadblock. She surfaced a few moments later. That's strange, there's something odd about this water, it's dense. Denser than water should normally be, Kurenai narrowed her eyes, it's a trap. JKZM lighted upon the surface of the water and raced over to stand above her. He had placed the great sword onto his back, on a magnetic harness in the center of his torso. He began to rapidly move through hand signs. Foolish Kunoichi, he named her, then, water prison jutsu. A dome of water rose up and surrounded Kurenai, escaping into the water, JKZM stated, big mistake. He began a malicious chuckle and started explaining the rudiments of his jutsu. This prison is made of water, but it's stronger than steel. He brought his free hand up and began to focus his attention. Water clone jutsu. JKZM turned his head to look at Naruto. Stay still, Kunoichi-kun. It's only while my hand is within the dome that you may continue breathing. Now, I will have a talk with your genin. My weapon should be finishing off the Kunoichi of your team. He motioned for his clone to attack. Rather than become concerned, Kurenai took on a curious expression. This should be interesting, JKZM-san. She sounded more like a fight spectator than a sensei concerned for her student. JKZM ignored her comment and turned to Naruto and sneered at him. Do you think wearing a headband makes you a ninja? He asked in derision. When you've hovered between life and death so many times that it no longer phases you and earned a place in my bingo book, then you may call yourself a ninja. To call an upstart like you a ninja is an insult to the title, he stated as he drew the mist tightly around them, closing the curtain on their vision. Just as the mist closed off his vision, Naruto immediately began to receive flashes of images of Tazuna embracing his daughter, while his aunt and Hade looked on in bemusement. Then the image turned, and Naruto saw the path leading from the water's edge to the front door of Tazuna's house. From the shore to about a third of the way there the tracks showed 3 sets of webbed feet. There he saw that a storage scroll remained on the ground, and from there 4 sets of human tracks continued to the door of the house. Naruto tapped his communication device. Sakura-chan, how are things going over there? He asked, while he began a series of hand signs. We're about even in skill to this hunter nin, Naruto-kun, Sakura answered. He's activated some sort of mirrored ice prison that allows him to move between them very quickly. It's only thanks to Hinata-chan that I don't have more wounds than I do already. She heard him gasp over the air and smiled tenderly for his concern. It's nothing major, Naruto-kun. You've given me worse than this when we spar, and you never hold back against any of us. Don't deny it, Sakura admonished him. Well, anyway, I've just gotten confirmation. Tazuna has made it safely home. He explained the reason for his call, while continuing the hand signs. So, you two can do whatever you need to get back to me. Roger that, Naruto-kun. Sakura sounded relieved. See you soon. Naruto finished all of that just in time to jump out of the way of a kick from the clone of JKZM. When he landed, he brought his foot down hard, which released his chakra into the ground. There seemed to be a hollow thrum, as if his stomp caused a reverberation in the earth. Ninja art. Dust Devil, the very dust on the ground, began to rise into the air and started swirling into a vortex. This was not wind-driven, but chakra-driven. The vortex began to send out dirt particles, and they began attaching themselves to the water molecules of JKZM's water-based chakra. The dirt became mud. Even the water clone was consumed by the plague of dirt, which forced it to its knees. Finally, the dusty, now muddy vortex collapsed, and with it, so did the clone. The Dust Devil did what it was meant to do, clear the air of moisture, breaking the hidden mist jutsu. JKZM did not let his surprise show on his face, but inside, he was dumbfounded that any genin could disrupt his jutsu, one he has mastered and used many times to dispatch hundreds of jonin-level ninja. Earth users included, and not one of them has ever figured out how to counter his ninjutsu. Who is this kid? Who taught you that, boy? JKZM demanded to know. Nobody, I just made it up on the spot. Every riddle has a solution, Naruto answered truthfully, but all further inquiries should be directed to boss, he stated, thumb pointing behind him to see, not Izuna, striding onto the field with a resolved attitude. The old man, JKZM wondered, then saw the old man's form liquefy, then shrink and reform into Naruto Uzumaki. Pleased to meet you, JKZM-san, the blonde declared, then looked at his clone, trade with sensei, please, you did a good job being me. The clone smiled, that's because I am you, boss. Then there was a flash of light, and Kurenai was standing where the flash clone once stood. In her place in the prison was the clone. He promptly grabbed JKZM's hand, which brought him out of his surprise. Let go, brat, JKZM roared, let go. The clone just laughed, using chakra to adhere to JKZM-san's hand. This is your sword arm, is it not, JKZM-san? You let your S ranking go to your head. The Naruto Bunshin chided him. You should never allow this arm to become occupied with anything but a weapon. That's sword art lesson number 1, he rebuked the man, at least among the Uzumaki clan. On the shore while JKZM was distracted by the Senko Bunshin, the original pulled a collapsible Fuma Shuriken from his pack, giving it to his sensei. I assume you know how to use this, Kurenai-sensei. Of course, Genin Uzumaki, she said, with a smile, Jonin are required to be familiar with every tool of our trade. Kurenai unfolded the wicked-looking piece of steel. This one was of a different design than Mizuki's a few months ago. Where his had 4 points of lethality, meant to puncture the enemy, this giant shuriken, also called Demon Wind Shuriken, had 4 arms with an edge on each arm. This one was meant to maim or decapitate your enemy. Kurenai did not need the same wind-up to throw this one as Mizuki, such is the difference in power and experience between Jonin and Chunin, she merely caused it to spin and threw it. There is a reason, JKZM-san is an S-rank ninja, some things are just ingrained with so much experience. Despite his preoccupation with the Flash clone, still in his prison, you're smart, boy, JKZM-san was still aware of his surroundings, including when he was under attack. Almost on instinct he reached out his other arm and caught the flying weapon, in the safest way possible, by the center orifice, but not smart enough. JKZM-san made his comment a little too soon, however, because right behind the first shuriken, flying in its shadow came another Demon Wind Shuriken. Both of his hands were occupied. Surely, he was staring his death in the face. Just at the last minute, however, the ninja jumped, just barely missing having his body cut in half. That shuriken was not what it seemed, however, because it suddenly reversed course, spinning rapidly, back toward the missing ninja. Just before it would have hit JKZM-san, it morphed into another Naruto. This Naruto wrapped his arms and legs around JKZM-san's body. This Naruto was using his magnetic bloodline to stick to the sword on JKZM-san's back. The Naruto standing next to his sensei was the original. He looked upon the man he faced, not with arrogance or superiority, but with respect. The look was returned. Thank you, Genin, and Naruto snapped his fingers. At Izuna's home a mile or so away, they watch as a blinding white light volcanoes high into the darkening sky. It seems to almost turn night into day. Not even a second later the power of such an explosion could be felt as a series of seismic tremors, not quite an earthquake, but it caused a few trees, old and deeply rooted in the soil to sway in their beds. Mikami, Tazuna and his daughter, Tsunami sate together, the sight of the explosion, temporarily overcoming his cynicism. What in the Naraku was that? Tazuna asked. That's my nephew, sending a soul to Tengoku, Yugao deduced, solemnly. To be continued. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.